If you missed the Ethereum pump, this is your second chance, because the man running the backbone of Solana's infrastructure, Mert Mumtaz, the founder of Helius, the guy who literally powers the apps, validators, and foundation behind the entire ecosystem. He just dropped a call so massive, it could define the entire bull run.
I do think Solana will become $1 trillion asset.
$1 trillion. Let that sink in. That's ETH territory. That's life-changing upside staring you right in the face. And here's where things get wild. Solana's about to enter a league no other chain has touched before.
Is Solana's consensus model is actually being rewritten. So it's actually about to become 100 times faster.
100 times faster. This upgrade means the finality in just 100 milliseconds. That's literally faster than a blink of an eye. That's exactly why this is a paradigm shift for all of crypto. And Mert's vision, he's saying crypto itself is about to rewire the entire global economy.
And basically what I think crypto will do is what email did to communications, crypto will do to markets and value.
Think about that. Email reshaped the planet. Solana could do the exact same thing for money. And if you're still doubting, if you're still thinking about all the past Solana outages, listen to this.
All those outages taught us new improvements that we added to the network, such that when Trump happened, for example, we were able to handle it.
Battle tested, hardened, and ready for prime time. This is your window into the next $1 trillion asset before the institutions catch on, before the herd piles in, before the chance is gone. So guys, stick with me because you're about to see why Solana is lining up to be the single biggest institutional trade of this decade. And guys, make sure that you check out Mert's podcast and his X account. I will link it down below. And guys, without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, welcome Mert to the stage. All right, Mert, great to have you. Welcome to the show. I want to start off by asking you a little bit about kind of Solana's institutional adoption, because right now we're seeing, Ethereum kind of being dubbed as institutional chain. And, it's something that I've been talking to my audience about for a while was, that you have kind of the trust factor, even though Ethereum is, much more expensive and slower than Solana, that seems to have the institutional trust right now. But we have recently a tokenized fund in China, the CMB Bank, has $1.74 trillion that natively just launched on Solana. What do you see in this regard as far as institutional adoption on Solana? And is it, do we see a lot more of that coming in the future?
Yeah, so thanks for having me first. As far as institutional adoption goes, I would say, if you just look at the state of things today, Solana is today more, let's say, retail and direct-to-consumer heavy versus something like Ethereum, where you have Tom Lee on CNBC saying a lot of bullish things. Even Bitcoin has been institutional in the sense that a lot of large players feel much more comfortable holding it. It's been around for much longer, right? So one of the themes is those two have just been around for much longer, and they have certain amount of network effects, social effects, etc. In fact, until really this year, they've also had more regulatory clarity, right? But I do think that people are maybe looking too into how things are today and not necessarily the trajectory or the slope of what's going to happen. And this is a mistake that was made on Solana during 2023 as well, when everybody just thought it was dead. But if you looked at, let's say, the fundamental characteristics, you could tell that when crypto adoption grew in the coming months and years, that Solana would be very well positioned to be one of the top chains. And that is what happened. And it's going to be the same thing here, where there's a few things here, right? One is that the fundamentals are on Solana's side, meaning it is extremely usable, scalable, secure. It has a critical mass of talent, developers, all these things. And then now we are especially getting much more into the institutional game, right? We have things like the Solana Policy Institute doing a lot of great work in DC. There's teams like Jito who are working with ETF issuers to support liquid staking, for example, right? Staking on Solana is going to be a much different experience than staking with Ethereum because there's no exit queues. The LSTs are much bigger, etc. And there's like 6, 7 filed. And then I would say the current game, obviously, as everybody knows, is the treasury companies. And
Yeah.
Bitcoin obviously started it, and then Ethereum is following along as well. But then Solana, the 4 that are live for Solana today are relatively small, although they are, it seems, getting bigger. But then there's going to be more in the future as well, right? So there's a lot of things that are going to be catalysts. And then, if you just look at things like stablecoin flows, RWA growth, right? Solana just closed R3, which has, a few billion in RWAs, private credit funds, all these sorts of things. I think they'll all do well, to be clear. Like, I don't think this is a Solana must do well and then Ethereum must lose kind of thing. It's that if you just look at the TAM, the market size of this and how it looks in the future, then Solana is very well positioned to be one of the leading horses here.
So for my audience who may or may not be familiar with you, how would you describe yourself as far as your positioning? Would you say that you're like a Solana maxi, or you just prefer to build in Solana? Like, just so we have the kind of context moving forward for the rest of this interview.
Sure. So I used to be on Ethereum. So I used to actually work at Coinbase, and I worked on Ethereum as a developer and Ethereum-esque chains like Polygon, Optimism, etc. And I also was quite early into Solana. And currently I'm the CEO of Helius, which is a Solana developer platform. And the reason for that wasn't necessarily tribalism or having massive investments or something. I mean, I didn't have that much money back then to begin with anyway. It was really that I looked at the state of things and where all the crypto applications were at that point. This was 2021, and where they should go, right? Because I just really want crypto to take over the world, and for that you just need to have usable apps that everyone actually benefits from, as opposed to this circular money game. And since I'm an engineer, I basically looked at the physics of the situation, and I decided, okay, Solana has some problems in terms of tech, but it's also the most promising, and it has this engineering culture where if we actually do ship the things that we can ship, then we're going to benefit from the highest scale in crypto, right? The fastest speeds, the lowest latency. And that in turn is going to attract developers who then build these things and finally help crypto with more and more adoption. And so I just worked backwards from that and then decided to come on Solana. But I will not say I'm a strict Sol maxi. Like, I have invested in Bitcoin companies, Ethereum companies, Cosmos companies even. I do a lot of angel investing. So, I tweeted the other day that, crypto is a crazy technology because you can actually hold more than one coin. And like, that's true. I do think that Solana has the best shot at doing certain things, like, taking trading mainstream and some non-store of value crypto use cases, for example. But like, as I said in the previous answer, it's going to be a very large market, right? We're talking about all of finance. And so it wouldn't really make sense for just one chain to be able to handle all of that.
One of the things that you said was you want to see crypto take over the world. I'm very much in that same camp. What do you mean by that, and what kind of applications are we talking about?
So when I say this, I kind of refer to it as the broad concept of markets, right? So basically, an analogy I like to draw is, before the internet, you had communications and media and publishing and all this stuff, or just information in general. It was local, right? Like, you had to read the newspaper, or you had to write letters to people, and you had to do all sorts of these archaic things. And then when the internet came by, you then were able to communicate with anybody in the world and absorb new information and distribute that information, right? You could blog, you could publish things, you could write emails. And basically what I think crypto will do is what email did to communications, crypto will do to markets and value, right? So now, I mean, like, what are the fundamental characteristics of markets that we care about, right? We care about them being efficient and having as much access as possible. And then for capitalism, we obviously care about capital flows, right? People in region A should be able to transfer capital to region B without all these, fees or these timing delays and censorship, right? And we want strong property rights, and we want people to actually have ownership of their assets. And then finally, we also want increased competition, right? And you put all these things together, and basically what you're doing is, in a sense, you are building the next step of capitalism, right? Everything that I just mentioned basically improves the inefficiencies of the capitalism system today. And we know that it's the best system that we have, right? It's resulted in really all the progress that we've seen in tech and economies. And so this actually takes it a step further. Now, it's going to take many years to get there because these things move slow and you're going against governments and regulations and all this stuff. But especially with like the new posture of the states, you can already see like the SEC basically saying they want to take all markets, all of finance on chain, right?
Right.
You have people tokenizing literally everything from like uranium on Solana, and the U.S. Housing Committee, for example, was saying like you should now be able to take mortgages out against your Bitcoin and things like this. So that's fundamentally what I mean. And then there's going to be some, other long tail use cases that we don't really see coming. So, for example, like prediction markets, I didn't really see coming, but like they obviously Polymarket was mainstream news basically. It replaced the New York Times for many people. You have socialized finance, right, with especially this new generation of users and kids and everything, where they share everything anyway. So now it's like trading and finance has become more socialized. And then you have, the boring back office stuff like cross-border B2B settlements, right? Stripe is launching a new chain to help with this, etc. So there's a lot there.
What do you think about how long have you been in crypto and kind of been a crypto enthusiast?
I was introduced to crypto in undergrad, so this would have been roughly 7-8 years ago. And at the time, so I did math and I was actually studying cryptography.
Nice.
But I figured you might need something like a PhD to contribute to crypto. So I basically was like, whatever. And then I actually worked at fintechs and banks in Canada. And then I really came back into it during COVID when I realized that all the markets were doing some very funky stuff, and like money movement was really difficult to like, because I had to send money to Turkey and etc. And at the time, this is before Coinbase had gone public. I was just looking into this area and doing a master's in robotics at the same time. And I was like, you know what? I think there's a lot of impact to be had here if I just focus on crypto. So I would say 5-6 years at this point.
The question stems from, I'm curious to get your thoughts on if you think that crypto and dApps are going to extend beyond markets and finance and go into the things that, I think that for me, when I first learned about smart contracts in 2015, we talked about disrupting incumbents, and I think the idea of like a decentralized Uber or something was really interesting, right? Or decentralized Airbnb or decentralized Spotify, just trying to remove that middleman from the equation, have it be truly peer-to-peer and have it be a more efficient type of ecosystem. I did an interview a couple months back with Hasib from Dragonfly and Avishal from Electric. And they seem to think that those ideas are like too purist in nature, and the centralization of these companies is what makes them really great, and something that a decentralized company probably can never do. Which was a little bit of a rain on my parade, because I always kind of had hoped that we would see these kind of things happen one day. Do you think crypto is going to always remain in the kind of finance and markets and kind of DeFi category, or do you think that eventually, just as more people learn about the use cases, as crypto becomes more abstracted away from the end user and feels more like Web 2, that then it'll be more possible for these kind of applications to exist?
Yeah, it's something I've thought about for a while. And when I first came into crypto, I went through the phase where I basically said it's kind of annoying that all the use cases are very financial. It's hyper financialized. This is why there's always scams and all these different things. There must be something else that you can do that's not financial. Over the years, though, basically, and I run a developer platform, and we have thousands of customers who actually build applications. And it's very hard to not find a use case that's financial. Like, it doesn't have to be trading, but for example, a great example is a company called Hive on Solana. Hive is decentralized peer-to-peer mapping, right? So they're basically their competitors, Google Maps. And the way it works is you get a dash cam, you put it on your car, and as you drive and map your routes that you go through every day as a driver, you earn tokens for doing it. And what's interesting about that product is that they actually tried doing it without crypto at first, but the payments to a global network of drivers was so prohibitive that crypto actually was the only way they could achieve this, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is just pure payments, right? It's kind of like, Satoshi's vision, P2P payments. And that's not inherently too financialized, but it is where crypto shines, which is just the transfer of value, right? And that value maybe doesn't have to be money. Maybe it can be different types of assets. It can be data or some supply chain stuff, information. There's probably cases like that. Um, but I think what we need to do is double down on what we know is going to work, and then kind of expand from there. There are some other interesting ones that I think will come up. So, for example, zero knowledge is probably going to be the best shot at non-financial use cases. So, if you want to do KYC somewhere, you actually shouldn't have to reveal your information. You should just be able to generate a proof saying this is what you're asking of me, and here I can prove it with math. And maybe it's something like training AI and saying like the data was trained on this set or something, and I can prove it, right? So I think there's that
Can you just
private.
explain zero knowledge so the audience understands, please?
Sure. It's to not get too technical. It's basically what the name suggests. It's you have some piece of, let's say, data. Let's say use the example of KYC. Well, what's the way you do KYC today? Well, you have to take a picture of yourself. You have to say, this is my income. Here's where I work. Here's my address. Here's all these things. And you have to literally show them that data. And so you're exposing it, right? Because if that person gets hacked or that institution gets hacked, now your data is everywhere. With zero knowledge, there is a way with math to basically say, to turn this into a math equation and say, I can prove to you with pure math, which is how the internet works, that data that you're asking of me, I have it. And it shows that my income is above a certain level and that I'm not a criminal and all these things, right? And then you just give them that data and then they verify it, and you don't have to expose your data or your confidential information in any way. And so you have reduce the risk that there will be a leak of your personal stuff in the future, right? So that's like the concept, and you can actually apply that to basically anything. Currently, the tech for it is a little slow; like it requires a lot of computation, kind of like AI. But it is getting very fast, very rapidly. So I think that's probably going to be the best shot.
Cool. Now, let's get into back into the Solana kind of growth. One of the things I've heard both from Raj and Toli were, I think that Solana's come quite a long way, and a lot of people used to give it shit for going down, including myself back in the day. But I don't think it's gone down in quite some time. And even after the Trump meme coin launched and it had just crazy volume, it just seamlessly chugged along. But what I've heard from both Raj and Toli was like they're definitely not satisfied with where things are. There's a lot more in the roadmap, and a long way still to go before they kind of feel like the chain is where it needs to be. You're really well plugged in and building on Solana. What does the roadmap look like?
Yes. So I did write a roadmap actually on solanaroadmap.com. And it's a joke because when you go to it, it actually says what it says here on my poster, which we have a saying, and it's called increase bandwidth, reduce latency. That's the North Star of the chain. And basically what that means is make the thing faster and quicker. And then, and it's interesting because once you actually solve that issue, everything downstream gets taken care of, right? So for example, high fees actually gets taken care of. User experience gets taken care of. Front running gets taken care of, right? Malicious MEV gets taken care of, all these different things. But on a more granular level, so for example, one interesting thing that's coming up is Solana's consensus model is actually being rewritten. So it's actually about to become 100 times faster, which is pretty
Wow.
crazy when you think about it. So like
That's with
currently
or without Firedancer?
without, right? So this
Okay.
is Firedancer is also coming, and I'll talk about that. But so like consensus is going to be fundamental. I mean, consensus just means how different nodes of the network come to consensus and agree on, okay, Mert has 5 Sol, right? And with a traditional blockchain, so like a Ethereum, for example, that'll take 12 seconds.
Right.
With Solana, it'll also take a few seconds, even though you can like kind of give the user a guarantee and we call them like pre-confirmations and all these different things. But Solana is going to release an update where you'll actually now get finality in 100 milliseconds, right? So that'll be 100 times faster, such that when you click on your Phantom wallet or do any action, before you can even blink, it'll be final, right? The data will have
Wow.
propagated all across the earth. So that's pretty crazy. That's a big change. Of course, there's
Do,
Firedancer coming. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So do you? I mean, with that kind of, what is the timeline for that? And then also with that kind of speed and throughput, like, is there really even a need for Firedancer at that point?
So the timeline is approximately Q1. So it's actually coming pretty soon. It's already being tested in testnet and things like this. The thing with Firedancer is it's sort of a different concept here, where consensus is, let's say, a protocol that everybody has to follow, versus Firedancer is one of the clients that follows that protocol. So a good example here is going to be something like Gmail versus Outlook, right? Where they're both actually obeying the email protocol, which let's say is the consensus protocol, but then the client itself might be Gmail, it might be Superhuman, it might be Yandex in Russia, or all these different kind of email types like messengers, etc. So that's the same thing here. So Firedancer is a new client, meaning it still has to adhere to the fundamental consensus law of Solana, but it is optimized in certain ways to make certain operations faster. Now, what's many people don't know here, and there's some outdated information, is that the existing Solana client, which is called Agave, which formerly that was the Solana Labs team, that client is actually also getting very, very fast. So Firedancer and Onza are actually competing to see who can be faster. And Onza is also getting very fast. So for example, they increased block sizes by 20% in the past month, right? So like now you can put 20% more TPS and transactions on Solana. And their goal is to get to 1 million TPS, right? So it's very unlike Ethereum, where Ethereum you kind of want like 4 clients that are all 25% of the network. Solana is more like let the fastest one win, basically, right? So that's kind of what's happening. So that's a pretty exciting update. And then there's 2 other big ones. One is
Sorry,
something.
real quick on the client side.
Mhm.
Uh, how does that work? From like, how will the end user or DApp builders do they have to choose which client they're using? And because if it's called Enza, the upgrade for Agave, is that right?
Onza is the team. Agave is the name of the client. So Agave would be
Okay.
like Firedancer.
All right. So Agave is improving, right? They want to make it much quicker. It's competing with Firedancer. When Firedancer is ready and Agave is up to, maybe they have the next update. Do any of these like how does that implementation work? And then how does it affect the end users and the builders? And how do we choose which one to use, or how does that work?
Yeah. So the user or the app developers won't have to worry at all. It's totally abstracted away from them. The only folks that this really affects would be the validators on the network, right? So like the miners on Bitcoin. And as a validator, you have to pick, do I run Agave's nodes or do I run Firedancer nodes, right? And this decision generally will come down to which one actually generates more money for me, right? Like as a validator,
Mhm.
how do I earn more? And like the more scale you can handle, likely speaking, you're probably going to earn more. So that's kind of how people will decide. So today, I think roughly 90% of the network is Agave, and 10% of the network is the first version of Firedancer, like today.
Okay.
And so it's the validators that pick, and there's 1,100 validators or something on Solana. We're actually the biggest one at Helius. We run the biggest validator, and so we would
Nice.
decide like, okay, which one do we think is better for earnings for our stakers, right? People actually stake with us, and which one is very stable for the network so that we don't have to worry about reliability in the future. But
Gotcha. And then
the users and the app developers don't care at all. Like they won't even perceive any difference like that.
okay, sorry. And then I interrupted you. You were continue on with the kind of roadmap.
Right. So there's two other big updates. These aren't part of the official Solana roadmap, but they're actually ecosystem teams that contribute to Solana. So one of them is called 0.0, and this is a very ambitious project where they're actually building a faster internet layer, right? So like when me and you talk right now, the microphone encodes my message and then sends it over the internet over these cables under the water, right, across the ocean, and then they come to you in this very fast speed of light. But it turns out that for the public internet, that message doesn't always go directly from, so I'm in Dubai right now. I'm not sure where you are.
Texas.
Well, let's say Texas. Okay. So it doesn't actually go in a straight line from Dubai to Texas. It actually goes through all these jigsaws. Like it might go to Japan. It might go to like New York and all these different kind of side tours because it'll just go where the cheapest internet is generally. With 0.0, there's these very fast kind of direct paths and like basically a faster internet where the messages travel faster. And so Solana will be utilizing that. And I think already 10% of Solana is utilizing that. So where like the internet speed will actually become even faster. So that's going to really change things. This is actually what high frequency traders today already do, like the Citadels and Jane Streets of the world already do. So that's another very big one.
So
yeah.
Can we just go into that a little bit more before you go into the next update? Because it's fascinating to me. So is 0.0 something that people can already use?
Yeah, so this is something, the network is in its early days, but if, as a validator, like you have to generally configure like where your machines run. Like, is it in a data center here? Is it in this other cloud hosting facility or something? But you can tap into the 0.0 network today. There's still some work to do. It also has like other technical benefits where like it can filter out spam and like useless transactions and things like this. But yeah, it's growing pretty fast.
Okay. And then you said that folks like Citadel and others already use, I'm guessing they're not using 0.0, but something similar to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. How does the 0.0 and the new internet protocol work with blockchain Solana?
Right. So the way it works is obviously when I'll give a concrete example. Like when I send you money, let's say on Solana, what happens is it goes to what's known as the block leader. So the current node that's producing the current block. And then it takes the transactions and then it propagates them. And then all the other nodes say, okay, this is correct. And they vote on it. And then it's final. Right. So, and then generally that happens over like a few seconds. With the new update that I just mentioned, it'll actually be only 100 milliseconds. Mm-hmm. However, like for example, if the current block leader is in Texas, and then the next one is in like Singapore, that's a very long distance to travel. It's literally across the earth, and it becomes worse when it has to take like these weird suboptimal routes. Like maybe it goes to Ireland first or something, and then comes down. Like it's not a straight line. It's like this weird pattern. And with 0.0, if it's more optimized, then that whole process happens faster. Right. So there's less latency perceived by the network and the user.
Cool. That's really fascinating. Okay, cool. And then the next one you were going to talk about.
Yeah, and then there's another one. This one is a bit more like hard to explain, let's say, but it's something called BAM by Jito, who is one of the leading teams on Solana. And basically, one of the problems on blockchains today is what's called MEV attacks. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think people are probably familiar with front running, for example, right? Like if you place a very large trade and then somebody sees that you place that large trade, they can just get out in front of it. Right. And then like give you a worse execution. Or there's something that's known as a sandwich attack where after they front run you and you get the worst execution, they just immediately sell. So you just got wrecked. Right.
Yeah.
And So with BAM, what will happen is that those transactions will actually be private, so that you actually will not be able to see what's happening until it's already happened. And so the amount of front running and malicious sandwich attacks will greatly reduce, right? So everybody will have a much better trading experience. There's also some other things that are like quite technical, but so we have something called app specific sequencing, which is where the application can define how their transactions are processed. So a very concrete example of this today is I'm sure everybody's heard of Hyperliquid. And one of the things that makes Hyperliquid really good is that they have a specific rule where, as a market maker, right, because people have to actually make the markets that people can trade against, a market maker can actually, when they place a cancel order for, like, let's say the quotes that they're making, the cancel actually gets priority over other order types. And since that happens, the market makers are more profitable and they can operate better without losing money. And as a result, more and more people want to make markets. And as a result, there's more liquidity and the trading is better and all these different things, right? Currently on Solana, that's like quite hard to do. And so we're introducing app-specific sequencing where the apps have much more control over how their transactions are sequenced. And so like this will greatly reduce the need for any apps to like build their own chains or build their own L2s or something. They can just do everything directly on the world computer that is Solana.
Cool. So now I'm curious to get your thoughts on kind of where do you see Solana kind of pulling a, I don't know, a kind of a Facebook to a MySpace kind of thing with Ethereum and Solana? Do you see Solana becoming kind of like do you see it flipping Ethereum both by usage and by market cap?
I would say in terms of usage, certainly, and it actually already has in many regards, especially if you look at some of the Blockworks numbers in terms of like volumes, revenues, and all this stuff. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that Ethereum has started offloading activity to layer twos, right? So like some of that is natural. Now, even if you combine all those layer two activities, Solana still surpasses them in some metrics, not all of them, of course, but like it's very head to head or above and below in some cases. So it's pretty near the top. And I would continue to expect that to be the case just because we're always going to compete and we're always trying to improve the user experience and everything. The market cap question is much harder, and generally, I don't know. I think what I can say is that Solana will become much bigger. I do think Solana will become $1 trillion asset. But I can't make the prediction if it'll flip it just because I don't know what the Ethereum guys will do, right? Like if they get more Tom Lees and stuff, it's like it doesn't matter what the tech does. At that point, people will just buy it, right? So I can't predict what they'll do. All I know is that Solana itself will grow many more multiples. And we just care about usage, right? We care about the trading. We care about the user experience and the things that are in our control. Like, I mean, XRP is above Solana, and like basically no smart contract activity happens there compared to Solana, at least. And so, like, it's very hard to predict like price action and all these things. But anyway, the TLDR is for usage, yes, and for market cap, I don't know what Ethereum will do or how it'll do. It'll depend on how they execute. But I know that Solana will grow many multiples.
As someone who's been building the space, Paid Network was my launchpad that we launched in 2021. I'm very successful, and then we did something else. Both of them are currently on base today. We did that because in 2021 that was just Solidity was where it was at, and to find Rust developers was much more difficult. Plus Solana was just getting going. Mm-hmm. We've had conversations internally about what it would be like, because I do enjoy the user experience on Solana over any Ethereum ecosystem chain. I think that it's all getting better across the board with account abstraction and what's happening, but as someone who builds developer tools, for anyone watching this who may be building in crypto, is there any way, or is anyone working on anything to bring to have like conversion of Ethereum smart contracts into like SVM, like Solana virtual machine type of agreements to allow a lot of this app ecosystem that was built in the early days, people who are still chugging along on Ethereum, to go into Solana?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a few ways to answer this. One is that, yeah, there's actually an EVM equivalent on Solana. It's called Neon, where EVM developers can actually deploy their EVM apps on Solana. And, there's some caveats and trust assumptions, but like as a starting point, you can do that. We also have some guides like on my website's company website's blog on like how do you map EVM concepts, Solidity concepts to Solana. But I think the big difference, and Anatoly talks about this all the time, is the programming model. And I'll give an example. So on Ethereum, for example, if you want to deploy a new coin or a new token, you actually have to write a new contract, right? And the contract has to specify like, okay, what can it do? It has to adhere to the ERC20 interface, right? On Solana, that's actually not the case. You actually, to create a new token, you do not need to write a smart contract. You actually don't need to know Rust, Solidity, or anything. In fact, with ChatGPT, you don't even need to know coding, but you need to just know JavaScript, or really any other language that can make an API call. And the reason is because the way that Solana works is there's a few very core programs. So one of them is called the token program. And literally all you have to do is call the token program and say, create new token. And then you specify the ticker and all these things. And it's just a very simple developer API call. And this is actually, I would say, like one of the reasons why Solana tokenization, and especially of like meme coins and all these things and NFTs as well, has taken off quite a bit on Solana as well, because it's just very easy to do as a developer. And then there's like other core programs, like swapping, for example. Everybody probably knows Jupiter, and like the AMMs and stuff. So you can actually reuse a lot of things on Solana without needing to write your own. So this is what you also get with one giant blockchain. You get a lot of composability, right? Because you don't have to redeploy it everywhere and all this stuff. So like that's kind of like this mental shift that most developers generally have to understand. But also like Solana is just like, half the age of Ethereum, less than that. And before my company, I would say like the developer experience was 10x worse, and it's still not perfect. There's still many, many multiples to gain here. But like that programming model is quite different, such that like the misconception is that you need to know Rust or something to build on Solana. That's actually not the case. Generally speaking, the smart contract you need has already been built, and you just need to call it with a network request. That's it.
Have you looked at closely the Move language?
I have looked at it. I would not say closely though.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering if you have any opinion on kind of Sui, Aptos movements and the kind of the Move programming language. I guess if I don't want to say, I think that I also agree with you that there's we have a whole 8 billion people on this planet. Countless amounts of money that can come into this industry. A lot of these blockchains are going to be successful, and they're all going to have their own use cases and stuff. But I guess like the reason I'm asking the question is because Sui's come onto the scene pretty aggressively. Still not quite to the awareness of other blockchains, but well, maybe. I mean, it's probably, I think, an attention maybe right there behind Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and then maybe we're talking about probably Sui as far as attention. So I just want to draw the conclusion or get your opinion on those two, because a lot of people are calling Sui the Solana of this bull run. I guess because it's probably cheap and fast. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've actually talked with the founding team there quite extensively at Sui. I wouldn't say quite extensively, but certainly have chatted with them, Evan, Sam, Kostas, etc., Adeni. And I think it's certainly a well-built blockchain. It's scalable. It's well designed. There are some challenges here just in terms of market dynamics. And what I mean by that is when Solana first launched, it was a, let's say, 10 to 20x better experience, or at least a different experience than Ethereum, right? You went from 12 TPS and $20 gas fees to thousands and like sub cents. Now with Sui, it's also quite good, but it's like, okay, is there a 10x difference to Solana? And it's like, there are differences, certainly. Like, I think you can probably do certain things better with Move than Rust, and it's probably easier as well. But it's like, is a difference that big such that you can rationalize to yourself, like, okay, if I move here, which, and you'll naturally today, as a function of age, you'll get less liquidity and less, like, let's say, tooling and less teams. Is that trade-off worth it for you to actually do stuff on that network? And for some folks, that answer will be yes. Some of them, it'll be no. And we actually, like, I would say Helius is pretty sought after in terms of like chains asking us to expand. And like, that's the thing I look at, right? It's like, if I were to move here, is there such a big difference that the next, 1,000x in developers and the people who actually build apps, will they actually build there? And it's like, a better programming language is one step of that, but it's unfortunately not the only one. And the other thing is, for better or worse, Solana has gone down a lot, which, like, it's a bad thing at those times. But actually, if you zoom out, all those outages taught us new improvements that we added to the network, such that when Trump happened, for example, we were able to handle it. And it's like, like, how much confidence do I have that any other network can handle that? And it's like, I can have some confidence, but I don't know for sure. So there's always that, like, little risk element. But like, I think they'll do well, especially if they can nail the go-to-market a bit better in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since Solana's gone down, right? Probably over a year and a half or something like that. I think, right?
Yeah.
What does Helius do exactly?
Right. So we make it easier to build on Solana, basically. So most people, depending on their knowledge, might have heard the term RPCs, RPC nodes, or something like this, or indexing. And basically, we talk to the blockchain on behalf of the user, right? So when you open up your Phantom wallet and you see all your balances, like you have, $10 worth of this, $5 worth of this, 1,000 of this, that's actually an RPC that's calling the blockchain and is getting that data for you, right? And how fast it comes, how reliably it comes, and how many different, like, things you can ask it. Like, for example, what's the history here? What did I do 10 days ago? Or, like, even when you make a transaction, when you send a transaction, it's the RPC that sends a transaction on your behalf. So, like, whether it lands or it doesn't, or how fast it lands, these are all things that the RPC helps you with. So we build that, and then we build a whole sort of suite of developer tools, like for consuming data very fast, which is very important in trading, right? Like, you want the price updates to be very, very fast, so you actually have an edge and the data is up to date. We also run the biggest validator on Solana, so we have almost 13 million in SOL, so that's a few billion that's secured with that validator.
Wow, that's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, for most people, the easiest way to say is like Google Cloud for Solana.
Yeah. So I'm guessing the majority of my audience is not developers, but if they have some SOL, and is Helius like a good place to go stake it, and what kind of APY would they get?
Yes, definitely a good place to stake it. In terms of the APY, it depends on the network activity. So, like, during Trump, for example, everybody was paying higher fees because there was a lot of traffic. And so during those times, you'll get a higher APY. And the reason is because we take no fees on the rewards that are generated. So on Solana, the way it works is there's issuance, right? So, like, new coins are printed. And we take no cut from that on our own, and it all goes back to the person who's staking with us, or the people who are staking with us. And then there's what are called MEV rewards. So this is like when somebody wants to do an arbitrage trade or something and they do an MEV tip. That also goes back directly to the staker. And so generally you can expect something like 8% to 10%, depending on network activity, of APY.
It's really good. And I don't understand, what's the incentive for you guys to offer this service with no fees?
Right. So this is a little technical, but on Solana, as an RPC provider, the more stake you have, the faster you can get data. and also the more transactions you can land. So we actually use that stake to help developers build faster applications. And so we don't need to make too much money from the validator because we'll make money from selling the product to developers.
Okay.
And there is also this other thing where there's what are called priority fees. It's kind of like gas fees on Ethereum, where the validators do earn that as well. And then we keep, so previously it used to be 50% that was burned and then 50% would go to the validator. So like the validator has 3 sources of income there and we only keep the third one. And then we actually started sharing that back as well.
Cool.
So like we put it back to our liquid staking token, HSOL.
So would you say that like Helius is the highest APY that someone can get for staking their soul?
There are some who also like incentivize their staking, like they actually take their DeFi profits and then put it back into that. So like we're not the highest, but we're near the top pretty consistently. And also like with staking, you really want a high trust operator like that really knows what they're doing.
Exactly.
Because if the node goes down or something, like you're going to lose out rewards, all these things. So it's like a combination of those things.
Right. And then also, Mert, so for folks who are just getting to know you, where can they follow you? And I heard you just started a podcast or something as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'm probably most well known for my Twitter, where I make a lot of posts. That would be 0xMert _. And I have like a little egg-looking profile picture. And then yeah, I did start a new podcast as well, pretty early. But like Twitter is really the main place.
And what's the pod about?
So with the pod, my objective is to get more startup founders that are non-crypto into crypto, or at least inspire more startup founders that are early in crypto to keep going.
Cool.
So really I try to get operators, founders, I had Anatoly on, et cetera, and ask them about like startup advice, product advice, things like this.
That's awesome. All right. Well, guys, if you're watching this and that's your cup of tea, make sure you go check it out. Mert, what's it called?
It's called Accelerate with Mert.
Cool. All right, Mert. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It was really great to have someone that's so deeply ingrained in the Solana ecosystem to kind of enlighten me. I've really kind of turned around my perspective on how bullish I was on Solana. Seeing that, like you said, every time that it went down, it was a battle wound. But as long as you learn from those mistakes and keep building, like that's something that I don't think Ethereum can do right now. There's just too much value on the network right now, and the only thing that they have, in my opinion, that keeps them relevant is that long-term track record not going down. So that's why institutions are comfortable there. But it gives space for someone like Solana to go ahead and really build something special, and maybe attract a different type of user, which I think is, like you and I both know, it's a huge market, and there'll be a lot of winners. So thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Great questions. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mert.